What's up, y'all? Welcome back to Bass Fishing Declassified. In this video, I'm gonna be sharing the 3 rules of winter crankbait fishing. Let's get into it. Rule number 1 of wintertime crankbait fishing is timing is key. You're not gonna get a ton of bites on a crankbait in the wintertime, though the fish you do catch a lot of times are really big. And the feeding windows are not that long during the wintertime, especially because we have these shorter days. Usually I get a really good feeding window in the first hour of the morning and then sometime in the afternoon after the sun's been out for a long time. The early morning feeding window is one that a lot of anglers miss because they don't want to get out to the lake super early when it's frigid and the line is kind of freezing in their guides, piling up on the reel seat, things like that. But a lot of times you're going to find the fish actually move up and start getting aggressive in shallow water, even in the wintertime when water temperatures are 40 degrees, even in the high 30s. And a crankbait is a great tool in the wintertime for targeting these semi-aggressive bass that are moving up to feed in the mornings. You can still cover a decent amount of water with a crankbait, even though you're gonna have to change up your retrieve, which we'll talk about here in another rule coming up. But the main key is that you want to take advantage of those few fish that are moving up in that first hour of the day. Most of the time they're going to be setting up on areas that received warmth the day before. Most of the time that's going to be around some type of riprap or rock cover. The rock is going to absorb heat from the day before and maintain that heat overnight. And so the fish that do move up in those early morning hours are going to basically use those rocks as their ambush zone or the place that they're looking to feed on shad and crawfish. It's interesting that these fish will move up in the morning time, even in the winter, and a lot of guys, again, miss that bite just because they don't want to get out there right at the crack of dawn. But if you do get out there early enough and start fishing those rocky areas in the morning, you can actually catch a lot of fish right off the bat. I've had a lot of days on the Arkansas River where I get out there as soon as the sun creeps up over the horizon, and I'll catch a limit of fish in the first 45 minutes on riprap banks, jetties, things like that, on a crankbait, and then not get another bite for like 3 or 4 hours. The next feeding window happens in the afternoon, usually around 1 to 2 o'clock. This is when the sun has been up for a while and you're going to get some heat that is captured again by rock or maybe wood as well as shallow grass. And you can target those areas that are warming up, which will bring those water temperatures up maybe a degree or 2, which attracts bait fish and crawfish. Again, a crankbait is a great tool in this scenario because you can cover water pretty effectively with a crankbait, and those fish are active enough that they still will eat that crankbait even in 35, 36 degree water, literally when the water is just about to freeze. And I have caught some fish in crazy water temperatures. Literally in the morning you'll say 33 degrees and like half of the coves are literally frozen over. You may even have to break the ice to launch your boat, but you can go to some of those riprap areas both in the morning and in the afternoon and still catch fish on a crankbait. Now the afternoon feeding window can get a little bit tricky because if you don't have a lot of sun and instead have cloudy conditions, the shallow water crankbait bite is going to be a lot more difficult. The only time I find that I can actually get on a good shallow water crankbait bite in the afternoon without sun is if you have a warm, windy day. Some days in the winter you may get 50-degree air temperatures in the afternoon, which will still warm up that water despite the lack of sun. And that wind will cause the wave activity against, again, rock, banks, riprap, bridges, things like that, which will then get the bait fish stirred up and aggressive, and you can still catch fish on your crankbaits. But in general, if I don't have sunny skies and I don't have a lot of wind or warm temperatures, I'm usually not going to be throwing a crankbait in the afternoon, and I'll go for other techniques which I'll talk about in upcoming 3 rules videos. So make sure you subscribe to the Bass Fishing Declassified YouTube channel so you don't miss those upcoming videos. Rule number 2 of winter crankbait fishing is match the crankbait shape to the water temperature. There's a lot of different crankbaits that I've experimented with over the years in the winter time, and in this video I'm going to be talking specifically about build crankbaits, or crankbaits that have a lip that causes them to dive. I'm going to make a separate video in the future with the 3 rules of lipless crankbait fishing. And I'm not going to be talking about lipless crankbaits in this video because there are different rules of thumb I use for them and different applications for them. So in this video, again, we're only going to be talking about these build crankbaits. But in general, there are a few I've found that have been the most effective for me in the wintertime. The first is this kind of wider bodied wigglewort style bait. This is actually the original Storm wigglewort, but there's also a few other tight baits like this. Another one I like to throw is the Spro Rock Crawler 55. It dives a little bit deeper than the original Storm wigglewort, though both work really well. These are wider bodied baits that give off a bigger wobble, and I find these work really well whenever the water temperatures are above 46 degrees in the winter. If the water temperatures are above 46 degrees, that water wobble will get you a lot of bites, and you can still catch fish on these baits all the way down to maybe 42, 43 degree water temps, though I find the effectiveness kind of drops off from there. So I usually only pick these up when water temps are above 46 degrees, and I'll throw them all the way up till water temperatures are in the 60s in that pre-spawn or early winter time of the year. So these baits can be very effective. I will match the color of these crankbaits to the water clarity as well as the depth these baits dive. I like to throw this burnt orange color in the original Spro wigglewort whenever I'm fishing in dirtier water. 1 foot to 2.5 foot of water visibility, maybe even down to like 6 inches, and that burnt orange has a really nice return in the water, and that Spro wigglewort dives anywhere from like 4 to 8 feet deep. You can grind it in shallow rock, but also work it out a little bit deeper to the edge of rock. So this crankbait is a great choice, very affordable, and still catches a pile of fish. You don't have to worry about getting those old like $25, $30 original Storm wiggleworts you can buy on eBay and stuff. There's a bunch of hype around them. I have 5 or 6 of the original Storm wiggleworts, and I haven't found that they catch more fish for me over just this one you can buy at Walmart. This is just the, I don't know, the new version of the Storm wigglewort, but it works really well for me. Very inexpensive. I just change out the stock treble hooks with some Gamakatsu size 4 or even size 6 EWG trebles. These little small EWG treble hooks work pretty well for me. You can also go to a size 5 Gamakatsu round bend if those fish are swiping at the bait. Works pretty well. Now, in terms of clear water situations, 3+ feet of visibility, I like to go to the Spro Rock Crawler 55 in more of these clear translucent craw patterns. The translucent craw gives off a little bit more subtle silhouette in that clear water, and I find that I get more fish to commit to this bait in those clear water situations when I throw that translucent craw. I also like that Rock Crawler 55 because it dives a little bit deeper than the original Spro wigglewort, though it has the same or same-ish profile. I can get this bait down to 10 to 11 feet of water on 10-pound tests with a bait caster, so this works out really well for me. Now, if those water temperatures are colder than, let's say, 46 degrees, all the way down to 34, 35 degree water temperatures, I like to go with flat-sided crankbaits. Flat-sided crankbaits have a lot less vibration and are a lot more subtle than the wider wobbling wigglewort style crankbaits I talked about earlier, and they excel more in that really, really cold water. There are 2 I throw, and these are really the only 2 flat-sided crankbaits I have in my boat anymore, though I've thrown a ton over the years. The one I like to throw in dirtier water situations, again, 0 feet of visibility all the way up to like 2.5 foot of visibility, is this Strike King Custom Shop crankbait. It is a balsa wood crankbait with a circuit board lip that dives 4 to 6 feet deep. It's in the Fire Tiger color. This is a discontinued bait, though there is another bait that's almost identical to it on the market right now. I'll link it down in the description, and it is exactly the same. I just have a bunch of these from years past, so I haven't bought any new ones, and I haven't lost them. So these are great baits. The balsa wood is something that I don't know if it makes that big of a difference, honestly, but it does help that bait come through snags better because it does rise slightly quicker, though I will at times put a little bit heavier treble hooks or even a little split ring on that front hook hanger to make that bait not rise as fast. I like sometimes for it to rise kind of slow. So depending on the situation I'm in, if I'm fishing around a lot of wood or things like that, I might give that bait more of a fast rise so it doesn't get hung up in the wood. But if I'm fishing around more rock cover where I'm less likely to get snagged, I'll go put a little bit extra weight on that front hook hanger, which will cause the bait to rise slower when I pause it, keeping it in the strike zone longer. These little flat-sided crankbaits are really tough to cast. That's one thing I will call out about them. And you want to make sure you have a nice rod and setup to be able to throw them. And as far as all of these baits, I actually use the exact same rod because it works well for all of them. And that is a Denali Lithium Pro 7-foot medium power moderate action crankbait rod. It has a lot of tip to it, but it's 7 feet long. And the nice thing about that 7-foot rod is that you can kind of almost create like a slingshot effect with some of these lighter crankbaits and whip them out there. I like kind of a long whippy rod with these flat side crankbaits, and I still throw the same rod with the wiggle warts as well. They work pretty well. But that longer whippier rod on a bait caster with 10-pound fluorocarbon line is my go-to. I will go down to 10-pound monofilament if those water temperatures are below 40 degrees. Monofilament is less likely to break compared to fluorocarbon in those really cold water temps. So that's the only change I'll make to my line. And this is actually the wrong reel on this rod. I haven't made the switch over to my wintertime reels. This is a 7-to-1 gear ratio reel, but I usually like to throw my flat side crankbaits and wiggle warts on a 5-to-1 gear ratio reel. 5-to-1 gear ratio is a lot slower per rotation, and it allows me to slow down that retrieve, which will be important here in rule 3. Before we get to that, I want to talk about the other crankbait I throw. So again, in the dirty water situations, 0 to 2.5 foot of visibility, it's that flat side Strike King Custom Shop balsa wood crankbait. Again, I go with those brighter chartreuse colors or the like fire tiger style colors because they give off a really good presence in that dirty water, and I just have the most success with this color pattern in that dirty water. But as we move to clear water that's very cold, I actually will go to this Strike King KVD 1.5 flat. This is a crankbait that I didn't like when I first picked it up because it casts like a potato chip. It is like the worst casting bait on the market, but it catches so many fish, and I've caught so many big ones and so many numbers on it that I just kind of put up with it and keep fishing it. Something about having that flat profile to that bait with that deeper bill that allows it to dive in that 6 to 8 foot range is extremely enticing to bass. And I've thrown this bait both in the dirtier water situations and the clear water situations, though I mainly throw it in that like 3+ feet of visibility. This bait comes in a bunch of different colors. The one I have right here is just this Delta red color. And I actually find this crankbait color works great for me both in dirty and in clear water. So I don't really worry about going for like a translucent pattern in this bait. And honestly, I think that's just because when you get in those really cold water temps, 40 degrees or less, the fish are biting purely out of a reaction strike. A lot of times they're not feeding necessarily. You're just bringing that bait right in front of their face to the point where when it gets in front of their face, they're just eating out of instinct rather than out of a like chasing feeding bite. So as a result, I don't think that the crankbait color actually matters all that much. I like to throw this crawfish pattern because most of the time those fish will be feeding on crawfish, though they will eat this bait if they're feeding on shad as well. This bait again dives a little bit deeper than that crankbait I showed earlier, that Strike King Custom Shop, and that allows me to fish just a little bit deeper in that clear water situation. And I'll throw both these crankbaits both shallow and on offshore rock in the winter time. All these baits again on that same rod, and those are the 4 crankbaits I throw. I've experimented with literally probably 75 different crankbaits over the years in wintertime fishing. I love throwing a crankbait in the wintertime, and these are the 4 that I've kind of landed on that work really well for me. Rule number 3 of wintertime crankbait fishing is retrieve outside of your comfort zone. What does that mean? Well, basically, when I'm fishing a crankbait in the wintertime, I either like to reel in this bait faster than you may feel comfortable with or slower than you may feel comfortable with. This is kind of counterintuitive, especially on the faster side, because a lot of anglers feel like in the winter, you should really slow down. But in a lot of cases, especially when those water temperatures are above 45 degrees, the bass actually aren't that lethargic or tough to catch. They're actually very aggressive at times in 45-degree-plus water temps. And so whenever I'm throwing that wiggle wart style or rock crawler style crankbait, I'm actually going to be working my crankbaits faster than the average retrieve. I would say a normal retrieve for anglers is that they're reeling their reel handle 2 to 3 times every second. So they're reeling their reel handle 2 to 3 times per second, bringing it in at kind of a normal clip. I actually like to reel it faster than that. So I might make 4 retrieves every second. So I'm reeling that thing in pretty fast in the winter time. And I feel like that gives me an advantage over a lot of other anglers that are just slowly working their bait. Now, one key with that is I'm not going to be maintaining that speed no matter what. If I do hit an object like a big rock or a lay down thing, something like that, I will stop my retrieve, pause it for about half a second, then continue to reel. And I would say that 85% of my bites come when I hit an object with this crankbait, pause it for a second, let it float up, and then start to retrieve again. That's when you're gonna get your bites. But you really wanna get those fish invested in your bait, and the faster you reel that thing in when the water temperatures are above 45 degrees, the more fish are going to get interested in the bait, and they're going to be chasing it down, and as soon as you stop it, they're going to get all over it. So if you're in those warm water temps, reel faster than you feel comfortable with. If your normal reeling speed is just 2 to 3 cranks per second, then speed it up a little bit, maybe 50% faster, 25% faster, depending on how fast you reel your bait in, and give that bait a few pauses throughout your retrieve after it hits a piece of cover, letting it stop for half a second and then reeling it, and you're gonna get a lot more bites in the winter if you do that in those warmer water temps. Now, if the water temps are colder, let's say 45 degrees or less, all the way down to like 33-degree water temps, I will go with a lot different retrieve, and that's basically with these flat-sided style crankbaits. In this situation, I want to retrieve my bait a lot slower than I feel comfortable with. So again, if your average retrieve is 2 to 3 rotations of the reel handle per second, a lot of times I'll try to go for 1 rotation of the reel handle per second, sometimes even slower than that. The way I kind of gauge it is that I want to get that bait down to depth initially, hitting those rocks, and then I want to reel my reel handle to the point where I am reeling it as slow as possible with enough speed just to make sure that bait is maintaining some contact with the bottom. It doesn't need to be digging into the bottom, it just needs to basically just be barely bumping the bottom every maybe second or two. You don't want to grind that bait all the time in there in those really cold water temps. And the slower you can retrieve it, the more bites you're going to get in those cold water temps. It's painful to fish it that slow, and that's why I go to that 5-to-1 gear ratio reel. Don't look at this one, this is a 7-to-1, but a 5-to-1 gear ratio. The Abu Garcia winch reels are really good, but any 5-to-1 gear ratio reel will work. And the idea behind this is that you're basically keeping that bait in front of those fish for as long as you can while still moving it at a speed that's going to get them to react to the bait. These fish in 45 degree less of water are so lethargic that a lot of times they don't want to chase a bait down to feed. They want something that basically just comes right in front of their face. But if you throw a jig or something really slow and just dead stick it there, a lot of times it's not appealing enough to get them to react and actually make the effort to eat. So by fishing a crankbait by their face, it's slow enough that it stays in that strike zone and doesn't move way too fast, but it also moves fast enough and it's ricocheting enough off the bottom that you're creating a reaction strike out of those fish and that instinctual feeding. And I've had so many days on the Arkansas River, which is where I do a lot of my winter cranking, where the water temperatures are mid to high 30s, 35 to 38 degree water temperatures. And I am just crawling that crankbait as slow as I possibly can in that early morning window and that afternoon window. And I can catch sometimes 10 to 15 fish a day cranking and have average weights of 15 to 20 pound bags of fish, which is really good for the Arkansas River for 5 fish. And it's using that retrieve, and it's really one of the only ways I can get them to bite unless I get clear enough water where I can throw a jerk bait and things like that. So this is a technique that works great, especially if you have, again, shallower lakes, dirtier lakes, you have a lot of rock in your lake, whether that is naturally occurring rock on the shorelines or even better is man-made rock. Riprap, any type of like sea walls that may have some deposits of rock around them, or just maybe someone put like a little rocky riprap stretch in front of their house, anything like that, their lake house, anything like that that attracts heat and is going to get the bait fish and crawfish kind of to use those areas is going to be the perfect spot for these crankbaits. These aren't deep diving baits, so it's not like I'm fishing these in 20 feet of water. Most of my fish are coming in 2 to 8 feet of water maximum with these baits. So don't think you need to fish super deep in the winter. A lot of those fish will move up shallow, they'll sun in that sun, or they will just move up first thing in the morning for whatever reason to go eat up there really shallow. And the crankbait is one of my favorite ways to catch them. Hopefully these 3 rules are going to help you put more fish in the boat on a crankbait this winter. If you enjoyed this video, make sure you subscribe down below to the Bass Fishing Declassified YouTube channel. We'll see you all next one.